Hi, my name is Etienne Sillon, and I'm going to show you a quick demo of a web platform that I've been working on. So the idea is to be able to design and deploy a web application so you can manage your data without coding and in a very agile and iterative process. So we're going to build a brand new order management application from scratch. We will start with a very simple app, but after a few iterations, we'll have a pretty powerful application complete with workflow. And all this without coding anything, just by using formulas like in your favorite spreadsheet. Okay, so we start by logging into the model editor and create a new application. We'll give it a name, like demo. And when we do this, it actually updates the database connection to point to a schema of the same name in a default database, which in my case is a MySQL instance running locally on my laptop. But it could be any database with a JDBC driver running anywhere in the cloud, for example. So the first thing we need to do is create a package, which is a logical grouping of related data types. So we're going to be managing products, orders, and customers. So let's call it CRM. So now we can create our first data type. And we'll call it product. And when we create a data type, we get a name attribute, which is just a string, and will show up in the GUI as a text field, which is fine. That will be the name of our product. We need a bit more detail for this product, so we need, for example, a description, which is going to be a text box. We need a price, which has its own dedicated attribute type somewhere, yeah. And we'll have a unique code for our product, which we're going to call a SKU. But the difference here is that we want this to be generated automatically, and we don't want it to be editable. So I'm just going to type false here. And the reason I'm typing false as opposed to using a checkbox is because this is actually a formula that will be interpreted at runtime and can be a bit more complicated than this and depend on other data values. In this case, false will be fine. Now, what I need to specify is how do I want this SKU to be calculated. And for example, I can use a very simple formula like SKU £, which is just a string, which we're going to concatenate with a unique number. In this case, we're going to use the record number, and we're going to call it's called next ID, which is a bit of a formula. So if we do this, the first product SKU is going to be SKU1, and the second one is going to be SKU2, etc. All right, so we would like to be able to manage different types of products. So we create a new data type called a product type. Again, it already has a name, which is fine. And again, we're going to add a description attribute. We can see what that product type is about, and we make that a text box. All right, so now I'll go back to the product, and I want to be able to reference the product type. So I create a new attribute, which I call type. And in this case, we choose a reference. Right, so we're going to be able to select the product type from the product. And for this, I just need to select product type as in the reference for that attribute. And that's pretty much it. So we already have a little bit of functionality there. There's not much. It already does something. So we can just publish it. Right, it's okay. And now we just log on to it to see if it works. Right, so just have to specify the name of the application. And the application is already has an admin user and password has been created, so we can just use this one. So this is our application. I just open the Data Explorer, and I can see my package here, the CRM package, and my two data types, product and product type. Product type is expecting a name and description, which is what we defined. Create the first one, call it a gadget, and you can see nice gadgets. Create a second one. With widgets and amazing widgets. All right, so if we go back to the list of product types, we have that. To the product, create a new one. And we can say create gadget 1 and description my first gadget. Now give it a price, $50, and I can see that the SKU is already initialized as we expected it, and it's not editable. And I can see my type, which I can update and select a gadget. And that's it. I have my first gadget. Okay, so our new app is already up and running. It doesn't do much, but we can already manage our product, and it was pretty easy to do. It took about a few minutes to design and to deploy. Not to mention that since we didn't create any new code, and no code was actually generated either, there is really a very limited amount of testing we need to do. So we show this to our users, and they say that they're only ever going to have a few number of product types, so they don't really want to have to go to a different page to select the product type. They would like to have a drop-down box, for example. And also they would like to see a list of products for each product type. So we say, okay, not a problem. We go back to our model, and we change the type attribute from a ref to a ref box. We still select the same product type, and that's going to change the selection from a link to a drop-down box. We can add a new attribute to the product type, and we call it product, and we are going to use a backref and point it to the product.type, and basically that's going to give us all the product that have this as this type as their type. Now, okay, so we made the change. The only thing we need to do now is to publish it again, and that's going to update the model. And we just go back to our application, log out, and log back in so we can have the new model, and open the Data Explorer again. Now, if we go to our products, create a new one, you can see firstly that the SKU has SKU2. We'll call it gadget2, newer, and put $25. And also now the selection of the type is a gadget, right? So is a drop-down box. So I don't have to go to a different page. But still, it's a dynamic page, right? So if I go to product types and create a new one, like thing, other things, right? Now I go back to product, create a new one, or edit this one. All the things is here, right? So it's still a dynamic, list, but I don't have to, go to a different page to select it. Also now, if I go to my gadget, I can see the list of the products that have this as their type. So I got gadget 1 and gadget 2. So that was a pretty short turnaround, and we were able to be very agile and update our application very quickly. Again, no code was needed. So go back to the model, and this time we're going to talk about our customers. Make that look a little bit better. Right, so we create a new data type for our customers. But this time the name doesn't really work for me because it's more complicated for customers. We need a title, a last name, a first name. So if I change that to a title, I don't really want to have to enter the title myself. So I want to have a list of things I can choose, like Mr., Mrs., and Miss, but I don't want to have to manage that into a different data type. So I'm going to create a model, and I call it customer title. And it's basically a list of domain values, like Mr., Mrs., and Miss. Now, this is a bit limited, and we might have to expand that later based on the feedback of our users, but at the minute we can use that. And so what we do is we make this title a domain, and we select the only domain value that we have so far, which is the customer title. So now it's going to be basically a drop-down box with this hard-coded list of values. So we need a last name, a first name, we need a last name, we need an address, and we need a suburb, for example. Now for the suburb we will need a new data type, and we'll call it suburb. What did I do? Delete. Wrong thing. New data type. Yep. And we call it suburb. And so it's got a name, that's fine. And we create maybe a postcode, which is a string, and that's pretty much it for the suburbs. And just as before, we're gonna make this one a reference to a suburb. Now, I do want my suburbs to be part of a state, so I create a new type called a state. and it's got a name, and we want it to have a list of suburbs, so I'll call that a new attribute called suburbs. And in this case, I'm going to use a composition, which is a reference to UML, and it's basically mean that the suburbs are actually going to live in the namespace of a state, which means that if I actually delete a state, I will delete the suburbs as well. All right. So again, we've made a bit of progress. So let's publish the app and have a look at what we get. So again, I need to log out, log back in. So now in my CRM package, I have a few more things. I do have suburbs and states. So let's start with the state. Let's create Victoria. And we're going to have a new suburb called Melbourne, 3000, I think. And Brighton East, where I live, and 3187. All right, cool. So now I have my state. Create another one, New South Wales. Wales, yes. And we just put Sydney, because I don't know any other postcode there. And that should be fine. All right, so now we have our states, we have our suburbs. Let's create our customer. Right, so now I have my title, which is a selection of Mr., Mrs., and Miss, which is great. My first name, I can use that one. I need to have my address. Yep. And then the suburb, I need to select my suburb. So I only have 3 suburbs: Melbourne, Brighton, or Sydney. This one, and that's it. Now there are a few things wrong with this, though. Firstly, the customer doesn't have a name defined, right? And that's because we removed the name attributes. Secondly, when I select the suburb, I don't want to have, when I'm editing, I don't want to have to go through all the list of all the suburbs in Australia. I would like to be that limited by state, for example. And also, I don't want to be able to see the suburbs here and be able to create a new one outside of a state, right? So let's go back and fix this. So the first thing for the customer, what we need to do, we need to specify a name formula. And there's a few on here. For example, we can see this one, which is basically going to use the title of the customer and then concatenate with a space, then the last name, then a comma, and then the first name, etc. So we don't need this at the end. Right? So that's it. We already fixed the customer one. Now for also the suburb, right? So instead of having a ref, I'm going to have a ref tree. So now the ref tree is going to basically look at the data model and see that I do want to select a suburb ultimately, but the suburb is part of the state namespace, therefore I will have to select a state first. And the last thing is, I don't want to see the suburbs at the top, I don't want to be able to create one without a state. So that's it, do that, publish it again, go back to our application, log out, log back in. It's a bit tedious, but you know, normally we don't have to do that, you just log in once. So see, firstly, we don't see the suburbs here, so I won't be able to create one outside of a state. And if I create a new customer, now I have to select the suburb before I can select everything. So if I select Victoria, now I can see Melbourne and Brighton East, but if I go back here and select New South Wales, I can only select Sydney, which is exactly what we wanted. Also, if I go back to here, now you see the title of the customer is Mr. Sillon Etienne, just like I specified. So I hope you agree that it's been pretty easy to create a basic data application with no code and in a very agile manner. We could actually do this while interviewing our users, for example, and create the application in real time while we're talking to them, which is, I think, a pretty cool idea. Now, it's all pretty basic so far, but we can actually build a pretty powerful application, including workflows. I don't think you want to watch me do this for the next 30 minutes, so here's what I prepared earlier. I just really wanted to say that. So here's the upgraded version of our application. We can still recognize the product type, the customer, suburb, etc. But there are a few more things in there. So a few more data types, like an order and an order line. So an order is just another data type. It's got the same thing, reference, is a link to a customer, and it's got a namespace, a composition of order lines. Right, and another line is basically a link to a product and a quantity, which is just a number, but also a subtotal, which is calculated automatically. Right, so again, we don't want to be able to edit it. It's a price, and it's basically the product price times the quantity. So when I say this, product.price is basically just following the link from the product and end up in from the product attribute in the order line, pointing to the product data type, and then looking at the price of that particular data type, and then multiplying it by the quantity, right? And then the same thing at the order level, we have the total, which is again calculated automatically, and the formula is the sum of all the line item dot subtotals, right? So it's basically looking at all the line items and looking at the subtotals and adding them together. There's also a status, which is new, processed, invoiced, or paid, and there's an assigned to, so which is pointing to a team member in the HR package. A team member is basically, in this case, he's just a manager of a team, right? And he's got something called this user here, which is basically an extension of a system reference, so a system record called $user, which is a user that I'll use to log in, right? So basically, what I'm saying here is that the team members are associated to a login user, right? So the team member itself is just another data type, another record, but you can associate it with an actual real user, right? So this is what I've done in this case. What else? Oh, okay, actions, right? So there's actions. There's two types of actions. There's a few more types, but the important ones in this one is a create action, which is something that happens when a record is created. And in this case, we are going to run a workflow called a process order. And also, we're going to put some data in the context of this workflow, right? So we're going to create a data key, which is order. And then we're going to place this, which is the record we're creating, which is an order record. So when we create a new order record, we're going to place it in the context of the workflow and give it a key of order, right? And again, there's another type of action, which is a GUI action, which shows up as a button on the UI. And in this case, we're updating the history and we're adding, plus equal means we're adding it. We're adding, so the history is going to show order processed at now, which is the time, the current time at the time we're running the action, and then status equal 1. So by default, when we create this order, the status has a default value, initial value of 0. So when we create the order, the status is going to be 0, which is new. And when we click on this process button, it's going to become process, right? Now, going back to this one, we said we're going to run the workflow, process workflow. So there's another editor, which is the workflow editor, which shows the workflow around this. So you can see it's all centered around this order record, right? And there's a start step, and this one doesn't have any prerequisites or requirements. So as soon as we run the workflow, it's going to start that step and run all the actions. There's only one action, which is assigned to processing. So basically, an action has an object formula and an action formula. So the object formula is how to retrieve the object that we're going to be modifying, and the action formula is what are we going to be doing with this object. So for the object formula of this one, we say get workflow context data of, and the key is order. So basically, this is just retrieving the order that's been placed in the context of this particular workflow. And and then what we're changing, we're saying assign to, so the user to which this order is assigned. We're saying we want to retrieve, so request data is basically requesting some data from with a formula, and we want the team record, and we want the team which has the name equal processing, right? So we retrieve the processing team, and then we want their manager. So basically what this is doing is assigning the manager of the processing team to the record, right, as the assigned to record. And what else we're going to do? Then we're sending a notification. This little bar here means that it's separating the actions. Then we're sending a notification to this user, right, and saying received order something. That's the link to the user, which I can click on on the UI. And then please process order is the text of the notification. And then we're updating the history, saying the order is now assigned to the processing team at this time. All right. And then there's a bit more things. So then when something else happens, when we process the order and the status becomes 1, then this next step is kicked off, which is the invoice order. And basically same thing, it's retrieving the order and it's saying assigned to, now it's retrieving the invoicing team manager, right? And sending a notice to the invoicing team manager and updating the history, same thing. And the same thing for the complete order. maybe it will make more sense if we log into. So this, I wanted to keep the demo and this new version at the same time. So now I called it test. Right. So this is the same thing. So we can still see our CRM with the customers, etc. And now we have this new HR package. We have 3 teams and they're 3 managers. And then we can see that the process manager is actually assigned to a system user called Proc Manager. So this is what I will log in as to be able to see those notifications and process these orders. All right, so let's create a new order. And so it automatically gets reference 7. I select a customer, Mr. Etienne Sillon. I select a product, and I say I want one of those. And then I say select a different product, and say I want 3 of those. Right. So in that order line, the subtotal is the one gadget is basically $100, and 3 times $50 is $150. For this one, the total of the order is $250. And it's assigned to nobody at this time, and there's nothing in the history. So I just have to update it, right? And then it doesn't look like anything is happening, but if I go back to the order, in fact, this is what happens. It's been assigned to process manager, because that's been done by the workflow in the background. So it's been assigned to the process manager, and it's the history I said, assigned to processing team at 6:07, which is now today, right? And then, so and the thing is that I cannot process it, I cannot invoice it, and I cannot complete it because I'm not part of these teams. I'm just the admin user at this time. So I need to log out, and now I'm going to log in as the processing manager, right? And as a processing manager, I have something in my to-do list, and it's a note. That's the result of the notification that we send during the workflow. And it says we received the order 7, and please process the order. So if I click here, now as a processing manager, I can process it. And if I do this, this is what happens. So firstly, it says the order is processed at the time, right, 608, and it's been assigned to the invoicing team, right? Because so this here comes from the action itself, but this comes from the workflow, right? Because there's a workflow that says when the order is processed, it automatically needs to go to the invoicing team, right? And again, I'm not the invoicing team manager, so I cannot invoice it, so I have to log out. And then now use the invoicing manager, log in, and I have something in my to-do list again, which is a different note, and it says it's been processed. So now it's assigned to me, I need to invoice it, I invoice it, and now automatically, again, we have updated the history, and the status has changed to invoice, and it's assigned to the shipping team now. Again, that's the workflow where we define that every time an order is invoiced, it needs to be assigned to the shipping team, right? And again, I'm not the shipping team, so I can complete it. So I log out. I log back in as the shipping team manager. And now, again, I have something in my to-do list. And it says the order has been invoiced. And now I can complete it. And it says the order is complete. Now, I know it's been a bit fast. I talk very fast, but there was quite a few things to go through. It's been a bit involved, but I think you can agree that, being able to achieve this without writing one line of code, just using simple formulas, we can become a bit involved, but still they're pretty simple. I think that's, I like it, and I hope you like it too. So, thank you very much for your time. I know it's been almost 25 minutes. I hope some of you have watched up to here, and thank you very much, and I would love some feedback. Thank you.